Most people think they know Chuck Norris. They think of the jokes, the invincible image, the man who never loses, never breaks, never backs down. A symbol of strength so exaggerated that it became a global meme long before memes even had a name. But that version isn't where the story begins. Not even close. Long before the fame, before the martial arts titles, before Hollywood and the legend, there was a boy who felt invisible. He wasn't strong. He wasn't confident. He wasn't the kind of kid people expected to become anything extraordinary. In fact, if you had met him back then, you probably wouldn't remember him at all. That's how quiet he was. He grew up in a home that didn't feel secure. His father struggled with alcohol, and that instability created a kind of silence in the house. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that makes a child feel uncertain about everything, about safety, about identity, about their own worth. And when you grow up in that environment, something happens inside you. You either learn to fight or you learn to disappear. For a long time, he chose to disappear. At school, he wasn't the popular kid. He wasn't the athlete everyone admired. He wasn't the one people looked up to. He was the one who stayed quiet, the one who avoided attention, the one who carried self-doubt like a shadow that never left. And here's the part most people never realize. That kind of childhood doesn't just fade away. It follows you. It shapes how you see yourself, even when the world starts to see you differently. There were moments when he felt like he didn't belong anywhere. Moments where confidence seemed like something reserved for other people. Moments where the future felt uncertain, not because of a lack of potential, but because of a lack of belief. And belief is everything. Without it, even the strongest path looks impossible. But life has a strange way of offering turning points when you least expect them. Not loud moments, not dramatic breakthroughs, just small doors that appear quietly, waiting to see if you'll walk through them. For him, that door came in the form of discipline, structure, and something that would slowly begin to change everything: martial arts. It didn't happen overnight. There was no instant transformation, no sudden burst of confidence, no moment where everything just clicked. At first, it was uncomfortable, frustrating, even intimidating, because stepping into something new means facing everything you're not. And for someone who already felt unsure, that's one of the hardest things to do. But he kept showing up, not because he was confident, not because he believed he would succeed, but because something inside him, small, quiet, almost invisible, refused to give up. And that's where real change begins. Not with confidence, not with motivation, but with repetition. Day after day, he trained, learning movements, practicing discipline, building control not just over his body, but over his mind. And slowly, something started to shift. Not on the outside, but on the inside. Confidence didn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It built like a muscle. One small improvement at a time. One less doubt. One more attempt. One more moment of choosing effort over fear. This is the part of the story people skip, because it's not exciting. It's not dramatic. It doesn't go viral. But it's the most important part, because this is where the transformation actually happens. In the unseen work. In the quiet consistency. In the moments where no one is watching, and you choose to continue anyway. There were still struggles, still doubts, still days where quitting felt easier. But something had changed. He was no longer the same person who avoided challenges. He was becoming someone who faced them, even if it was slowly, even if it was imperfectly, even if it was hard. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build through discomfort, through repetition, through showing up on the days you don't feel ready. The world would eventually see Chuck Norris as a symbol of power. But what they didn't see was the boy who once questioned his own worth. The boy who had to fight battles no one applauded. The boy who built himself from the inside out, long before anyone noticed. Because before the legend, there was a process. A quiet, painful, disciplined process. And it hadn't even reached its hardest chapter yet. Because life doesn't test you when you're weak. It tests you when you start becoming strong. And what came next? Would challenge everything he had built so far. The moment you begin to change, life notices. Not in a supportive way, not in a way that makes things easier, but in a way that tests whether your growth is real or just temporary. For Chuck Norris, this was the phase where discipline had already started shaping him, but life wasn't done challenging him yet. Martial arts gave him structure. It gave him a sense of control. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting to life, he was actively shaping who he was becoming. But growth comes with a cost. Because when you start moving forward, you begin to see how far you still have to go. Training became more intense. The expectations became higher. And the gap between who he was and who he wanted to be became impossible to ignore. There's a moment in every journey where excitement fades, where motivation disappears, where the reality of effort hits you harder than anything else. This was that moment. He wasn't the best, not even close. There were others who were faster, stronger, more naturally gifted. And when you're surrounded by people like that, doubt comes back louder than ever. It whispers the same questions. Are you really meant for this? Do you actually belong here? Or are you just pretending? Most people quit here, not because they lack potential, but because comparison destroys their belief. And belief is fragile when it's still new. But something inside him had changed. Before doubt would stop him, now, it challenged him. Instead of walking away, he leaned in. Instead of avoiding failure, he faced it. Again and again, and failure came. Often. He lost matches. He made mistakes. He struggled to keep up. There were moments where all the progress he thought he had made felt like it disappeared overnight. That's the reality no one talks about. Growth isn't a straight line. It's messy. It's frustrating. It makes you question everything. But here's what separated him from the version of himself he used to be. He didn't quit. Not because it was easy to continue, but because he had already experienced what it felt like to stay the same. And that felt worse. Every loss became a lesson. Every mistake became feedback. Every setback became a decision point. Go back to who you were, or keep becoming who you're meant to be. He chose to continue, quietly, relentlessly, without needing recognition, without needing validation. Because at this stage, something powerful had taken root. Self-respect. Not the loud kind, not the kind that shows off, but the quiet kind that says, I will not betray the work I've started. And slowly, results began to follow. Not instantly, not dramatically, but undeniably. His movements became sharper, his reactions faster, his mindset stronger. The same people who once seemed far ahead no longer felt unreachable. This is the turning point most people never reach, because it requires something rare. Patience without reward, effort without applause, consistency without immediate results. But that's how real transformation works. It hides until it's undeniable. For Chuck Norris, this phase wasn't about becoming famous. It wasn't about recognition. It wasn't even about winning. It was about proving something to himself. That he could change. That he could grow. That he wasn't defined by the boy he used to be. And once you prove that to yourself, everything changes. Because you stop needing the world to believe in you. You already do. But life wasn't finished testing him. Because just as he was starting to build confidence, a new challenge appeared. One that had nothing to do with martial arts. Nothing to do with skill. Nothing to do with discipline. A challenge that would test something deeper. Responsibility, pressure, and the weight of real life. Because becoming stronger as a person is one thing. But holding on to that strength, when life starts demanding more from you, that's a different battle entirely. Growth changes you, but responsibility tests you. By the time Chuck Norris began to build real confidence through martial arts, life introduced a new kind of pressure, one that couldn't be solved with training alone. This wasn't about discipline anymore. This was about survival. He joined the United States Air Force. And just like that, everything shifted. The environment was stricter, the expectations were higher, and the margin for error almost non-existent. In the military, it doesn't matter who you used to be. It doesn't matter how much progress you've made. Every day, you are tested again, physically, mentally, emotionally. For someone who had spent years rebuilding himself, this could have been overwhelming. A place where old doubts return. A place where pressure exposes every weakness. But something was different now. He wasn't the same person anymore. The discipline he had built through martial arts became his foundation. Waking up early, following structure, pushing through discomfort, doing what needed to be done, even when he didn't feel like it. These weren't new challenges anymore. They were habits. And habits are what carry you when motivation disappears. But the Air Force didn't just test his discipline, it tested his identity. Because for the first time, he wasn't just responsible for himself. He had to carry responsibility in a bigger way, to be reliable, to stay composed under pressure, to perform, even when things felt uncertain. That kind of pressure forces you to grow up fast. There's no room for excuses, no space for hesitation. You either rise to the standard or you fall behind. And again, he chose to rise. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but consistently. It was during this time that something important happened, something that would shape the rest of his life. He was introduced to Tang Soo Do, a Korean martial art. Tang Soo Do wasn't just about fighting. It was about philosophy, respect, control, inner strength. It demanded more than physical effort. It demanded presence, awareness, patience. And for someone like Chuck Norris, this was exactly what he needed. Because strength isn't just about what you can do. It's about who you become while doing it. He trained relentlessly, day after day, balancing military responsibilities with personal growth. While others rested, he practiced. While others relaxed, he refined his skills. There's a certain kind of obsession that appears at this stage. Not unhealthy, not loud, but focused. A quiet commitment to becoming better no matter how long it takes. And over time, mastery began to form. Not because he was the most talented, but because he stayed longer than most people would. This is the part of the journey where things start to separate, where average effort ends and uncommon dedication begins. But even then, nothing was guaranteed. No fame, no recognition, no promise that any of this would pay off. And that's what makes it powerful. Because he wasn't doing it for an outcome. He was doing it because he had become someone who couldn't go backwards. That's the real transformation. When quitting no longer feels like an option. But life had one more shift waiting. Because eventually, every structured environment ends. Every system you rely on disappears. And when that happens, there's only one question that matters. Who are you without it? When his time in the Air Force came to an end, he faced a new reality. No clear path. No guaranteed future. No system telling him what to do next. Just uncertainty. And the weight of everything he had built so far. This is where most people get lost. Because structure creates comfort. And without it, direction disappears. But for Chuck Norris, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more difficult. Because now, for the first time, everything depended on him. No system. No safety net. No instructions. Just a choice. Return to an ordinary life. Or risk everything to chase something greater. When structure disappears, reality begins. For Chuck Norris, leaving the Air Force wasn't freedom in the way most people imagine. It was uncertainty. No clear roadmap. No guaranteed income. No system telling him what to do next. Just silence. And responsibility. This is the phase where many people fall apart. Because it's easy to be disciplined when someone else sets the rules. It's easy to stay consistent when your environment forces you to. But when it's all on you, that's when the truth shows. He had built strength. He had built discipline. He had built resilience, but now he had to build something else, a life. And life doesn't reward effort the same way training does. There are no clear levels, no guaranteed progress, no one telling you if you're doing it right. He made a decision, not the safe one, not the obvious one, but the one that aligned with who he had become. He chose martial arts, not as a hobby, not as a side path, but as his future. At the time, that decision didn't look impressive. It didn't look smart. It didn't look secure. Because passion without proof is a risk, and most people avoid risk. He opened martial arts schools, started teaching, trying to build something from the ground up. But building from zero is never easy. There were financial struggles, uncertainty about the future, moments where the effort didn't seem to match the results, days where doubt came back, stronger than ever. Because this wasn't training anymore. This was real life. Bills, responsibilities, pressure. And here's the part people don't talk about. When you chase something meaningful, you will question it. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. Is this worth it? Should I choose something safer? Am I wasting my time? These questions don't mean you're weak. They mean you're human. But what matters is how you answer them. For Chuck Norris, the answer wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. Keep going, even when progress felt slow, even when results were uncertain, even when no one was watching. That's the phase where most dreams die. Not because they're impossible, but because they take longer than expected. But something about him had changed permanently. He no longer needed quick results. He no longer depended on external validation. He had built something deeper, passions. And patience is powerful because it allows you to continue when everything around you suggests stopping. Slowly, things began to shift. His schools started gaining attention. Students increased. His reputation grew, not because he chased recognition, but because he focused on mastery. This is the part most people misunderstand. Success doesn't come from chasing success. It comes from becoming so good that success has no choice but to follow. He wasn't famous yet, not even close, but he was building something real, something sustainable, something that reflected who he had become. And then, an unexpected opportunity appeared. Not planned, not forced, just one of those moments life presents. That can change everything. A connection, a meeting, a door opening into a completely different world. Hollywood. At the time, it probably didn't seem like destiny. Just another opportunity, another risk, another unknown. But sometimes, the biggest turning points don't feel big at all when they happen. And what he chose to do next would take him from a quiet martial arts instructor to a name the entire world would eventually recognize. Starting over never gets easier. It doesn't matter how much progress you've made, how strong you've become, or how disciplined you are. When you step into a completely new world, you are a beginner again. And for Chuck Norris, Hollywood was exactly that. A new world, a different game, a place where everything he had built didn't automatically give him an advantage. In martial arts, he had control. He understood the rules. He knew how to improve. He had earned respect. But in Hollywood, none of that guaranteed anything. No one cared how many hours he trained. No one cared about his discipline. No one cared about his past struggles. Because in this world, perception mattered more than effort. And that's a difficult reality to accept, especially when you've built your identity on hard work. He didn't walk in as a star. He didn't get special treatment. He wasn't immediately recognized. He was just another person, trying to find a place. This is where most people hesitate, because starting over feels like losing, like all your past effort suddenly means less, like you've gone backwards. But that's not true. Starting over isn't failure. It's expansion. The discipline he built, the resilience he earned, the patience he developed, none of it disappeared. It just needed to be applied in a new way. And that's exactly what he did. Quietly, consistently, without expecting immediate results. He began taking small roles, learning the industry, understanding how things worked, adapting, observing, improving. No shortcuts, no instant success, just the same mindset that had carried him this far. There's a moment in every new journey where reality hits hard, where the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels overwhelming. And in Hollywood, that gap was huge. He wasn't the best actor. He didn't have the strongest connections. He wasn't the obvious choice. And yet, he stayed. That decision alone separates people. Because most don't fail due to lack of ability. They fail because they don't stay long enough. He kept showing up, kept learning, kept improving, even when progress was slow, even when recognition was minimal, even when doubt returned. And then a moment came, an opportunity to work alongside someone who was already becoming a global icon. Bruce Lee. This wasn't just another role. This was exposure, a chance to step into something bigger, a moment that could either elevate him or expose him. Because being around greatness does one of two things. It inspires you, or it intimidates you. For many, it creates pressure, comparison, self-doubt. But for Chuck Norris, it became fuel. Working with Bruce Lee wasn't just about acting. It was about growth, about seeing a different level of mastery, a different level of presence, a different level of belief. And instead of shrinking in that environment, he expanded. He learned, adapted, elevated his standards. This is what powerful environments do. They don't make you successful. They show you what success requires. And for the first time, the pieces of his journey started connecting. The discipline from martial arts, the resilience from his struggles, the patience from building his own path, it was all preparing him for this. But even then, nothing was guaranteed. Because one opportunity doesn't create a legacy. What you do after it does. And what came next would determine whether he remained just another name or became something unforgettable. One opportunity can open a door, but it can't keep you inside. After working alongside Bruce Lee, the world finally started to notice Chuck Norris. But attention is not the same as success. And recognition is not the same as staying power. This is where the real challenge begins. Because once people see you, they expect more performance, more results, more proof that you belong. And for someone who had spent most of his life building quietly, this sudden shift could have been overwhelming. The pressure increased, the expectations rose, and the margin for error became smaller than ever. This is the phase where many people break, not because they can't succeed, but because they can't handle being seen. Because being visible means being judged, criticized, compared, questioned. Is he really that good? Was that just luck? Can he do it again? These voices don't always come from others. Sometimes they come from within. But here's what made the difference. He didn't chase the spotlight. He stayed focused on the work. While others focused on fame, he focused on improvement. While others chased attention, he built consistency. And slowly, that mindset began to separate him. He started landing more roles. Not instantly, not explosively, but steadily. Each project became a step forward. Each performance became stronger. Each experience added another layer of growth. This is what real success looks like. Not one big moment, but many small ones stacked together over time. And eventually, something shifted. He was no longer just participating. He was leading. From smaller roles to becoming the main figure. From being part of the story to carrying it. That transition is not easy. Because now, everything depends on you. The success, the failure, the outcome. There's no one to hide behind. No one to carry the weight. And this is where identity matters most. Because if you don't believe you belong there, it shows. But Chuck Norris had built something most people never develop. Internal certainty. Not arrogance. Not ego. But a quiet belief that said, I've earned this. And that belief changes how you move, how you act, how you respond under pressure. It allows you to stay calm when everything around you feels intense. And that's exactly what he did. Film after film, role after role, he became more than just an actor. He became a presence. Someone people recognized. Someone people respected. Someone people remembered. And then something unexpected happened. The world didn't just see him as skilled. They started to see him as something bigger. A symbol of strength, of resilience, of discipline. The same qualities he had spent years building in silence were now visible to everyone. But here's the part most people don't realize. By the time the world calls you strong, you've already fought battles they'll never see. And for Chuck Norris, those battles never really stopped. Because success doesn't remove challenges. It changes them. Now, the challenge wasn't becoming successful. It was staying relevant, staying grounded, staying true to who he was, in a world that constantly tries to change you. And what came next would test something deeper than discipline, deeper than ambition. It would test his values. Because at the highest level of success, you don't just decide what you achieve. You decide who you become. Success changes your life, but it also tries to change you. By the time Chuck Norris reached a level where his name carried weight, where his presence meant something, and where people across the world recognized him, the challenge was no longer about becoming successful. It was about staying himself, because success brings options. More money, more influence, more attention. And with that, more temptation. The temptation to chase more, to prove more, to become louder, bigger, more visible. But there's a hidden danger in that, because when you keep chasing the next level without reflection, you can lose the reason you started. For Chuck Norris, the journey was never about fame. It wasn't about becoming a global icon. It wasn't about recognition. It started with something much simpler: becoming stronger, becoming better, becoming someone he could respect. And now, standing at a level most people only dream of, he had to make a decision. Does he keep chasing more? Or does he protect what he has built? This is a question most people avoid, because the world teaches you to always want more. More success, more money, more attention. But very few people ask, at what cost? Because every level of success demands something in return. Time, energy, focus, sometimes even relationships. And this is where things become real. Because behind the image of strength, there's a person with values, with priorities, with people who matter. At different points in his life, Chuck Norris stepped back. Not because he couldn't continue growing his fame, but because he chose something deeper: family, faith, meaning. That decision doesn't always make headlines. It doesn't go viral. It doesn't get celebrated the same way success does. But it's one of the hardest decisions anyone can make. To walk away from more in order to protect what truly matters. Because it requires clarity. It requires confidence. And, most importantly, it requires knowing who you are without the spotlight. This is where many successful people struggle. They build everything externally, but lose themselves internally. But Chuck Norris didn't forget, because his foundation wasn't built on fame. It was built on discipline, on struggle, on years of becoming someone from the inside out. And that kind of foundation doesn't break easily. The world continued to see him as a symbol, the strong man, the unstoppable force, the legend. But the real strength was in the choices no one saw. Choosing to stay grounded, choosing to stay disciplined, choosing to stay aligned with what actually matters. Because at the highest level, success is no longer about proving something to the world. It's about being honest with yourself. And that's a different kind of battle. A quieter one, a deeper one, the kind that doesn't happen in public, but defines everything behind the scenes. And maybe that's the most powerful part of his story. Not the fame, not the success, not the image, but the ability to reach the top and still remain in control of who you are. Because in the end, the strongest person isn't the one who conquers everything. It's the one who doesn't lose himself in the process. And that's where his story leaves us. Not with an ending, but with a realization. Because when you look past the legend, what you actually see is something much more human. And maybe that's why it matters. Because it reminds you that strength isn't about being invincible.